The Orion Gate was not just a station, it was a symbol. Hanging silently in the orbit of a dead star, the colossal structure stood as the seat of galactic order, a neutral ground where wars had been prevented, peace treaties signed, and species judged by the laws of the Concord. Today, the name called was not a fringe pirate faction or a rebellious moon colony. It was humanity. As the vast chamber filled with delegates from over 300 civilizations, the name echoed with a mixture of curiosity, concern, and quiet fear. Humanity had joined the stars less than 100 years ago, yet they now stood at the center of a trial that could shape the future of the galaxy. The charges were clear: illegal weapon development, destabilization of frontier systems, and harboring of artificial intelligence far beyond allowed boundaries. But the real question everyone was thinking, though few dared say, was simpler. Why had humanity grown so fast, and what else were they hiding? Into the silence stepped Ambassador Alina Riker. She was not what many expected. No armor, no military medals, no enhanced implants. Just a human in a dark, clean uniform, standing straight with calm eyes. Around her, beings of 1,000 shapes whispered in their languages, watching her every movement, waiting for aggression, arrogance, or even apology, but Riker offered none. When given the floor, she walked forward slowly, her voice clear but not loud, and said only one thing: "You misunderstand us. What you've seen was restraint." That single sentence dropped over the room like a storm waiting to break. Delegates glanced at each other, some leaning forward, others recoiling slightly. Had they heard correctly? Restraint?
The silence
Was broken only by the mechanical voice of the Concord recorder, confirming her words for the record. Riker waited, then continued, not with anger or defense, but with something colder, steadier. She spoke of how Earth was a latecomer to the stars, entering after most major species had already spread across sectors. Humans had no ancient empires, no lost relics, and no claim to any sacred technologies. What they had was desperation and a desire to survive. She told of Earth's fractured past, wars, recoveries, and the fragile peace that led to their first space launch. What followed was not a slow journey, but a leap. In less than a century, humans discovered warp travel, built ships that adapted like living things, and colonized dozens of planets. Where others had taken millennia, humans moved like fire through dry grass. The tribunal had always wondered how. Today, Riker offered no detailed blueprint, only a message. Humanity had limits. They just hadn't been tested yet. A Valari delegate, with shimmering silver skin and a long neck, interrupted. "If this is restraint, Ambassador Riker, what would unrestrained humanity look like?" A fair question. Riker's expression didn't change. "We're still learning that," she said. "That's why we've held back." Then came the flashbacks. Not holograms, not projections, but testimonies submitted by Concord observers over the last 20 years. The defense played them in sequence reports that were filed but never deeply reviewed. A mining colony on the edge of Valari space attacked by raiders defended by human settlers using repurposed excavation tools and AI-controlled drones. The raiders had superior weapons, shields, and numbers, yet they were routed. Another report showed a fleet of Concord ships that attempted to scan a human relay station and were blinded by feedback they couldn't explain. "We called it a system malfunction," the technician had written. "But I'm starting to think it was a warning." The room grew colder. Riker stepped back, allowing the silence to work in her favor. She didn't need to shout, because the room had begun to realize something terrifying. Humanity never used its best cards. The weapons deployed in past battles were outdated by the time they were launched. The ships seen in patrols weren't the fastest or most powerful. Even the AI systems reported were simple compared to what humans had once theorized back on Earth. So why weren't they using their full strength? Riker didn't answer that directly. Instead, she said, "You assumed our actions were reckless. They were careful. You thought we escalated conflict. We escalated, ... before anyone noticed." Whispers turned to arguments. Some delegates felt humanity was lying, playing mind games. Others believed Riker, because deep down, they remembered how strange human behavior had been since they arrived. They negotiated like predators, but spoke like diplomats. They took insult, silently, but responded with perfect strategy days later. They never asked for more territory, but always expanded anyway, quietly, efficiently. And now, here stood their ambassador, not to beg, not to explain, but to warn. Not a threat, not yet, but a clear line drawn. Riker's final words for the session chilled even the more aggressive species. We didn't come to conquer, we came to test who we are when given power. So far, we've passed our own test. The question is, ... can the galaxy say the same? With that, she turned and walked back to her seat, calm and controlled. The tribunal was left in silence once more, but this time the silence was not one of order, it was one of fear, because they knew, whether they admitted it or not, something had changed. Humanity had not come to play by the galaxy's rules. They had come to show what restraint may end and what might happen if it ever ended. The tribunal chamber was quieter than before. After Ambassador Riker's first statement, something had shifted in the air, like a storm was waiting behind the stars. Delegates leaned forward in their seats, some with curiosity, others with suspicion, and a few with clear concern in their eyes. Now the testimonies began. A procession of voices, witnesses, and records were brought forth not by the humans, but by alien observers from across the galaxy who had seen Earth's people in action and lived to question what they had really witnessed. First to speak was Commander Thalrin of the Enor Dominion, a species proud of their fleet and known for their sharp strategies. He recalled an incident on the edge of Concord Space Kversny, a dusty, mineral-rich world considered of little importance. A mining colony of only a few thousand humans was suddenly surrounded by an Anor battle group, testing their own influence in the border systems. Thalren expected a quick surrender, but the humans did not flee. Instead, within hours, they had repurposed mining drones, laser cutters, and even atmospheric processors into automated weapons. The battle group lost 2 ships and was forced to retreat. They didn't even have real weapons, Thalren admitted, but they fought like they had everything to lose, and something far more dangerous behind them. The next report came from a more cautious source, a Valerie scholar named Jinko, who arrived with a portable archive of data collected secretly from human science broadcasts. With trembling hands, Jinko showed diagrams, theories, and hidden patents pulled from public human networks that suggested something unbelievable. Humanity had mapped weapon systems centuries ahead of current Concord tech. Some of the designs involved energy manipulation that could bend planetary shields. Others hinted at faster-than-light communication using quantum entanglement. Some were simply classified with blank titles and warning tags written in languages unknown even to translation AI. They have ideas we cannot understand, Jinkal said softly. But they're not building them. They're waiting. One by one, more voices spoke. A trade captain recalled seeing a human freighter run silently through a pirate blockade without any escort, unharmed. A border patrol from the Lascari Union remembered how human drones quietly disabled their surveillance satellites without firing a shot. It was not just strength that alarmed the tribunal, it was the precision. The cold, quiet way humanity acted only when needed, and never more than necessary. They never gloated, never boasted. They simply did what had to be done and vanished into the stars. This pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. Alina Riker did not interrupt any of the testimonies. She listened patiently, as if waiting for the others to come to a realization on their own. When it was her turn again, she stepped forward and said, "We came to the stars not to conquer, but to test who we are when we have power. So far, we've passed our own test." Her tone was calm, but her words struck deeper than any threat. The tribunal had expected defiance. They got quiet honesty instead, and that was far more unsettling. The Concord had seen empires rise through violence, through fear, through manipulation, but never through measured restraint. Then came the final twist of the session, dropped like a stone into still water. A Zarelian cryptographer stood before the tribunal with a transmission intercepted near the edge of human-controlled space. It had been heavily encrypted, sent across multiple relay stations using shifting frequencies, and was not meant to be heard by Concord ears. The message was simple, spoken in human standard English, carried a chilling tone of control. Message to the galactic powers. We've been fair. We've been patient. But prepare yourselves. The gloves come off next time. The chamber fell into whispers, ripples of concern moving like electricity across the rows of delegates. Some were quick to dismiss it a bluff, a fake, maybe even a trap. But others knew better. The voice was real. Transmission was clean. And it had been broadcast from a deep military network that until now, no one knew existed. Lena Riker did not deny it. She only nodded once, as if acknowledging that some truths no longer needed to be hidden. That message was not an attack, she said. It was a warning. Not to you, but to those who believe chaos and strength are the same thing. The mood in the chamber turned heavier. The Drenari warlords, once loud critics of human involvement in Concord affairs, suddenly fell quiet. Even the distant-thinking Serati, a race of gas-based beings who usually avoided politics, requested a closed-door session with the humans. Something was changing. The tribunal had thought humanity was a problem to manage. Now they were starting to see a mirror. Earth's people had power more than anyone expected, but they had chosen patience. And in that patience lay a message. Far more powerful than any warship, outside the Orion Gate, ships moved into different formations. Human vessels, sleek and silent, remained still, but every Concord fleet near them subtly adjusted their positions, no longer aggressive, but watchful. Inside, the delegates spoke in quiet tones, choosing their words carefully, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. The sparks they had ignored, Kavroznine, the unmapped weapons, the peaceful restraint, were no longer distant rumors. They were warnings. And for the first time in a long while, the galaxy wondered not what humanity was capable of, but what had kept them from showing it. Inside the grand hall of the Orion Gate, the atmosphere was more tense than ever. After the testimonies and the intercepted message, the tribunal was no longer simply curious about humanity, they were afraid. The central debate now turned sharp. Should humanity be sanctioned, or even expelled from the Galactic Concord entirely? Some argued that humans were a danger to stability, that their rapid advancement in silent weapons programs made them unpredictable. Others, quieter but no less concerned, believed provoking humanity might be worse than anything they had imagined. There was no shouting, no drama, just long pauses, cold looks, and measured words because everyone knew that something fragile had cracked beneath the surface. And while the diplomats spoke in circles, something far away had already begun. Across dozens of systems where human colonies existed, some well-known. Others hidden among asteroid belts and uncharted moons, a silent protocol was activated. There were no explosions, no open threats, just a signal passed from one human outpost to another. Its name was never officially confirmed, but later, records would refer to it as the Chainfire Doctrine. Less than a galactic hour, hundreds of Concord surveillance probes near human territories simply stopped transmitting. Attempts to reconnect were blocked, systems jammed by signals that changed frequency faster than Concord AI could track. Illegal AI taps placed inside human research. Satellites shut down, some even melting their own cores. Spy drones from 3 different member species returned to their launch vessels broken, crushed, or in some cases, carefully disassembled and packed with notes that read, "We noticed. Please stop." And still no shot had been fired. In the tribunal, updates began pouring in, first as whispers and alerts on private devices, then as full reports sent to high-ranking representatives. The silence of Earth's answer was louder than a fleet of warships. Lena Riker remained seated, calm as always, not denying anything. She didn't need to. The message was already clear. Humanity had not attacked, but they had responded. And that response was not of rage, but of complete control. It was like chains shaking gently, not to threaten, but to remind everyone that something powerful had just stirred. Then the object appeared. It came into the Orion system through a deep space. Fold, moving without escort, without broadcast, and without delay. The Concorde defense systems scanned it from every angle, trying to determine its origin, its weapons, its purpose, but the readings made no sense. The ship was enormous, silent, and old, not in design, but in presence. Its structure was unlike modern builds, shaped like a spearhead with no visible engine trails. No known ship matched it. It came to rest just beyond the outer docks of the station and remained still.
Oh.
Then its hull lit up with a simple message projected in every language. Recognized by the Concorde, even those considered extinct, we restrained ourselves. Because we believed in peace, we still do. The ship was identified only by a single name etched into its dark plating, the Arbiter. Whispers began among the tribunal delegates. Some had heard the name in passing from ancient human files. A Martian-class dreadnought, rumored to be part of Earth's deep reserve. A fleet never spoken of publicly, never declared to the Concorde, built not for war, but as a last decision. Officially, it did not exist. And yet here it was. After hours of silent analysis, a delegation was allowed to board under strict conditions. What they found inside was even more unsettling than the ship itself. The interior was clean, empty, of crew, but filled with locked vaults containing advanced prototypes. One vault displayed a weapon labeled Quantum Phase Lance that seemed to bend light around itself. Another showed a compact core, pulsing with unknown energy, identified only as a dark matter reactor. There was a sealed container labeled Atmospheric Terraforming Deployment Unit, a device that, in theory, could rebuild entire planets in days. No guards. No threats. Just proof that Earth had more than anyone guessed stand, chose not to use it. Riker addressed the tribunal. One final time that day. She didn't brag. She didn't warn. She only explained what no one had wanted to believe. Humanity had been building, not to conquer, but to prepare. The technologies were not secret because of ambition, but because Earth knew it had to grow. Without becoming what it feared. We never wanted to lead through fear, she said. But if fear is the only language left, we can speak it, for a while. Her words landed quietly, but with weight that settled in the bones. The Concorde had two choices. They could punish Earth, try to contain it, and risk waking a giant that hadn't even stretched yet. Or they could understand the truth. Humanity's restraint wasn't weakness. It was principle. They'd never been forced into peace. They had chosen it again and again, even when they had every reason not to. And now, with the Arbiter hovering quietly outside Orion Gate like a shadow of what might come, no one dared to ask what unrestrained humanity would actually look like. Outside the tribunal hall, delegates moved slower. Discussions turned quiet. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the Arbiter, a beacon continued to blink not as a threat, but as a reminder. The chains had rattled, but they had not broken. Fear spread quietly through the halls of Orion Gate. Not through shouting or alarms, but in quiet whispers, in the long silences between debates. In the way some delegates now avoided looking directly at the human ambassador. After the arrival of the Arbiter and the display of silent power behind Earth's restraint, the tribunal had lost its earlier confidence. Still, one group refused to be swayed. The Drenari, a species known for their military might and history of conquest. The representative High Commander Valrex stood and called for what many had feared, preemptive action. He claimed that humanity's silence was not peace, but preparation for dominance. You do not wait for a predator to bare its teeth, he said. You strike first. His words echoed through the chamber, stirring the old Alliance members, who remembered wars that had nearly torn the galaxy apart. It almost seemed like a decision had been made until space folded silently above the station. Without warning, ships began to appear. Not warships, but diplomatic vessels, clean, silver, and precisely shaped. They came in tight formations, not to intimidate, but to surround the Orion Gate in a calm, protective ring. Earth's diplomatic fleet had arrived not with weapons drawn, not with demands, but in silence, as if to say, we are watching now. The timing was too perfect. The Concord's own tracking systems hadn't detected their approach until they were already in position. This wasn't just about strength anymore. It was about control. Every move humanity made seemed to be 2 steps ahead, not because they were faster, but because they understood how others thought. In that silence, Alina Riker stood again. She did not raise her voice or change her tone. She simply began to speak. She did not threaten the tribunal. She told them a story. A timeline, in fact, not of what humanity had done, but of what they hadn't done. She spoke of the colony on Ventari Prime, where thousands of civilians were lost when unknown raiders glassed the surface. Earth had the target's coordinates within hours, and yet no retaliation ever came. Then she described the incident where a Concord Black Ops unit released a hacking worm into a human research AI network expecting chaos. Instead, the system locked down, traced the intrusion, and deleted itself without counterattack. And finally, she mentioned the siege of Tau, SETI, where time distortion weapons had been fully charged and ready. But we did not deploy them, Riker said, because we still believed the war could end without rewriting time itself. The room fell silent again, but not from fear this time. It was something deeper, a realization that humanity was not just powerful, they were careful, deliberate, disciplined. Riker's words pierced deeper when she added, "You fear what we could do. We fear what we might become if we did." It was not pride. It was warning and sorrow, and something even older wisdom earned through struggle. Some of the oldest species looked away, ashamed. They had judged Earth as reckless, but Earth had shown more patience in 1 century than some had in 1,000 years of galactic rule. Then came the unexpected. A representative from the Iridian people, a young species that had only joined the Concord 50 years ago, stood and addressed the tribunal. "We were once told to fear Earth," he said, "but I see something else. Now I see what we hope to become: strong, but not cruel, capable, but not careless." Others followed. The Relkin, the Asari. Even the humble Thalarol younger civilizations that had watched in silence now stood behind humanity. They weren't siding with power, were siding with restraint, with principle. The meaning of leadership was changing in real time. The Dranary representative sat back down, his voice lost in the shifting tide. The Concord's old power structure, based on control through fear and history, was being questioned. No one wanted a war now. They didn't want to push the one species that had proved again and again it could win, but chose not to. Some began to whisper that humanity should not be punished, but elevated. That maybe the galaxy needed a new example of leadership, one not built on old empires or ancient wars, but on something more modern, more conscious. The ability to walk away from destruction, even when destruction is possible, outside the station. The human fleet remained motionless. They didn't scan. They didn't aim. They waited. It was not a show of force, but a message written in silence. "We're here. We're ready. But we still believe in peace." Lena Riker's final words that day stayed in the minds of all who heard them. We didn't come to lead. We came to prove that power does not always mean dominance. That the strongest voice is not always the loudest. As the tribunal session closed for the day, no vote was taken. There was too much to consider, but the feeling in the air had changed. The idea of Earth as a threat was fading, replaced by something more unsettling to those used to ruling unchecked. Respect, not demanded, but earned. The giant had spoken, not with roar, but with reason, and the galaxy had listened. The tribunal chamber, once filled with tension and suspicion, now sat in a strange silence. Silence not of fear, but of deep thought. For days, the voices of warning, argument, and history had echoed across the walls of Orion Gate. Now, the final decision had to be made. Earth had not fired a single shot, had not made a single threat, yet it had forced the galaxy to see itself in a new light. The idea of punishing humanity seemed not only dangerous, but unwise. The more the Concord tried to treat Earth as a threat, the more it exposed its own discomfort with the kind of strength that chose discipline over domination. So, after long deliberation, proposals began to shift. A new suggestion rose from the Flornaut exile, not sanctions, but invitation. A restructuring of the Concord, one that acknowledged the reality they could no longer ignore. Humanity, once considered a wild card, was to be offered a seat on the High Council. It's not because they demanded it, not because they were feared, but because the galaxy needed them. There's a counterbalance, a reminder, a symbol of what power should become. Elena Riker stood for the final time before the tribunal. Not as a defendant, or even as a representative of a growing power, but as someone who had seen too much history repeat itself in too many forms. She looked across the hall, her voice calm, steady, and without pride. "You feared us," she said. "Not because of what we did, but because we didn't do what others would have. You thought our restraint was a trick. It wasn't. It was our choice." She didn't speak like a conqueror, and yet her words held the weight of someone who understood both the cost of war and the danger of unchecked authority. "We're not your enemies," she continued. "We're your mirror. The restraint you fear is the same strength you need." Her words didn't rise, didn't echo, yet they landed in the hearts of every species present like a quiet truth that could not be denied. No one interrupted. No one challenged her. The galaxy, in all its age and complexity, was learning something. Simple, yet powerful. That peace held by fear never lasted, but peace held by mutual respect could reshape everything. The human fleet outside remained still, offering no celebration, no show of victory. Their mission had never been about taking control. It was about making a statement without force. That statement now had a name: the balance of respecta. Principle that was soon recorded into the Concord Charter as a new founding rule. Power is not proven in domination, but in discipline. The Arbiter, still in quiet orbit, became a symbol of that message. Not a threat, not a weapon, but a reminder. Within weeks, other younger civilizations began adopting similar protocols, building not just fleets, but philosophies. They studied how Earth handled danger without panic, how they developed weapons but never tested them unless absolutely necessary, how they built allies instead of vassals. Earth's entry into the High Council was not marked with flags or fanfare, but with something far stronger: silent respect. Even the Drenari, once the strongest opposition, chose to accept the change without resistance. Their own advisors admitted that Earth's approach may have been the only thing that stopped a war none of them were prepared for. As humanity took its place at the High Council, Riker made one final request: that the Council never forget how close they had come to misunderstanding strength as danger. That power used with care should never be mistaken for weakness, and that silence in the face of insult may speak louder than any counterstrike. She warned them gently that humanity had not changed its mind about war. It simply had chosen not to become like the worst chapters of galactic history. "The moment we forget why we showed restraint," she said, "is the moment we lose the right to lead." Years later, many historians would call the Orion Gate Tribunal a turning point in galactic civilization, not because of battles or broken empires, but because of what did not happen. There were no wars, no explosions, no dramatic speeches of conquest, only quiet choices, careful steps, and a powerful example set by a species who had once been underestimated by all. Humanity never claimed to be better. They simply chose to be measured. That choice changed everything. Outside Orion Gate, the Arbiter remained. It never moved, never broadcast again. But every now and then, young diplomats would be brought to its viewing deck to be reminded of the day the galaxy learned a new kind of strength. The kind that didn't roar but spoke softly and was heard louder than any army ever could be.